Picture it, comrades, and let it sink into your soul like a winter wind howling off the Volga. It's June 22, 1941, dawn creeping over the vast Russian steppe, where the horizon stretches endless from Brest to the Urals, a sea of grass lit by the first rays of a blood-red sun. Operation Barbarossa's opening hour, and the Soviet frontier's about to burn. Young Ivan, a conscript from a Tula Kolkhoz, barely 19, stands guard in his faded olive tunic, his Mosin Nagant rifle slung loose, the barrel cold as the morning dew. He's sipping watery tea from a dented tin, joking with his squad about the fascist clowns across the border, when a strange hum cuts the air. Not thunder, not the rumble of tractors, but something unnatural, like a swarm of steel locusts. He squints west, and there they are. Junkers J-87 Stukas, the Luftwaffe's dive bombers, their gull wings glinting like vultures circling a dying beast. The Soviets laugh. Oh, they laugh hard, their breath fogging in the chill. Fascistski igrushki, Ivan spits, grinning, his buddies slapping their Mosins like old friends. To them, it's a circus, a clunky, slow-flying relic from a Germany drunk on tanks and blitzkrieg. They've got their own arsenal, stubby I-16 fighters, yaks rolling off assembly lines, and the T-34 tank, a steel monster already whispered about in Red Army barracks. That Stuka? It's a toy, they reckon, underpowered, outdated, a sitting duck for a Yak-1's cannons were a burst of 37mm flak. Let the Nazis waste their fuel, a commissar sneers, waving it off like a bad joke. They figure it'll stall in a dogfight, crash in the mud, or get shredded by Soviet anti-aircraft guns. Mockery runs thick, thicker than the borscht in their mess kits as they toast to Mother Russia's might.
Then the sound, a wail rising to a scream like the damned clawing out of hell's gates. The Stuka dives, nose plummeting at 80 degrees. Its sirens, those Jericho Trumpets, shrieking, shredding the air, shaking the earth. It's no plane anymore. It's a banshee, a reaper, a nightmare forged in metal. Bombs drop, 500 kilos of high explosive, smashing trenches, twisting T-34s into scrap, sending men running, screaming, or frozen in primal terror. Ivan's laugh dies in his throat, his tea spills, his Mosin feels like a stick against this storm. Laughter turns to panic, prayers, the stench of cordite and fear. The steppe erupts in flame, and the Red Army learns a brutal truth. This ain't no toy. This is the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka, the Luftwaffe's terror weapon, and it's carving the Eastern Front in fire and dread. Pull up a chair, light a papirosa, and walk this blood-soaked road with me. This ain't no fairy tale. It's history, raw as a steppe blizzard, etched in pilot logs, soldier diaries, and the scars of a war that ate millions. No shine, just truth. To grasp that scream, that dive that broke Soviet souls, you gotta rewind to the ashes of the Great War, when Germany's wings were clipped by the Treaty of Versailles. It's 1919, and the Kaiser's empire is rubble, the Luftstreitkräfte grounded, forbidden from dreaming of the skies. But in the shadows of Weimar's chaos, engineers and visionaries plot a comeback. Enter Hermann Pohlmann, a quiet designer at Junkers Flugzeugwerke in Dessau, a town of clanging factories and coal smoke. It's 1933 now, Hitler's in power, and the Luftwaffe is reborn in secret, defying Versailles with clandestine airfields and whispered designs. Pohlmann is handed a mission, build a Sturzkampfflugzeug, a dive bomber, or
The Ju-87 takes shape on drafting tables, a single-engine monoplane with inverted gull wings for stability, fixed undercarriage with spats like a gangster's polished shoes. Powered by a Junkers Jumo 210 engine, it's no speedster, 190 miles an hour at best, but it's built to dive, steep and true, with automatic pull-out gear to yank pilots from blackouts at 6 Gs. Armaments lean, 2 7.92mm MG-17 machine guns in the wings, 1 MG-15 for the rear gunner, and a bomb load of up to 700 kilos, a 500-kilo bomb under the fuselage, or smaller ones on wing racks. By 1935, the prototype flies, shaking the earth at Dessauges Airfield. By 1937, it's battle-tested in Spain's Civil War, screaming over Guernica with the Condor Legion, turning Republican trenches to dust. Luftwaffe brass, Goering, Jashonek, see a weapon that's more than steel. It's terror incarnate. But the Stuka's got flaws, and the Soviets know it. Or think they do. It's slow, vulnerable to fighters, lightly armored with just 5mm plates around the cockpit. In a dogfight, it's a lamb among wolves, relying on Bf-109 escorts to survive. Soviet pilots raised on tales of Red Baron duels scoff at its 120-mile-an-hour cruise speed. A flying coffin, Apollo truck barks in a 1940 briefing, waving grainy intel photos. The Red Air Force's I-16 E-Shock hits 280 miles an hour, turns on a Kopek. The SB-2 bomber, faster still, laughs off the Stuka's plodding pace. Why fear a dive bomber when you've got thousands of planes, millions of men, and Stalin's industrial beast waking in the Urals? The Soviets, hardened by purges and collectivization, trust their numbers, their grit, their motherland.
They're wrong. The Stuka's power ain't in speed. It's in precision, in terror, in those sirens. The Jericho Trumpets, fixed to the landing gear, aren't just noise. They're psychological warfare designed to break morale before the bombs hit. A diving Stuka hits 350 miles an hour, sirens screaming, shaking the earth, shredding nerves. The Soviets don't see it coming. Not yet. June 22, 1941, 0300 hours. Operation Barbarossa unleashes hell. 3 million Axis troops, 3,600 tanks, 2,500 planes smash into the Soviet frontier from the Baltic to the Black Sea. The Luftwaffe's Stuka wings, Sturzkampfgeschwader II Eimelmann, STG-77, STG-1 lead the charge, diving on airfields, supply dumps, troop columns. Near Brest-Litovsk, Hauptmann Hans-Ulrich Rudel, a 24-year-old Stuka pilot with a hawk's eyes and a zealot's heart, pushes his Ju-87 into a dive. His siren wails, a 500-kilo bomb drops, and a Soviet fuel depot erupts, lighting the dawn like a second sun. Red Army conscripts, caught eating kasha from mess tins, scatter like roaches. They laughed at us, Rudel writes in his memoir Stuka Pilot, called our planes crutches for the spats. Then we dove, and their laughter burned.
By noon, 1,800 Soviet aircraft are smoking wrecks, most on the ground, caught napping by Luftwaffe precision. The Stuka's dives are surgical. Bridges collapse, tank columns choke, command posts vanish in plumes of earth. Soviet flak crews, manning 37mm ZSU-37 guns, fire wildly, but the Stuka's angle, near vertical, makes it a ghost until the bombs hit. Private Ivan Petrov, 20th Rifle Division, scribbles in a diary, found later in a mass grave. The sound came first, like devils screaming. Then the earth shook, and my platoon was gone. I hid under a dead horse, praying to a god I didn't believe in. The Red Air Force scrambles, but their I-16s are outgunned by Bf-109 escorts, their SB-2s too slow to evade. The Stuka reigns, its sirens the anthem of Blitzkrieg. The emotional toll is a sledgehammer. Soviet troops raised on propaganda of red invincibility feel dread creep like frost. Pride curdles to fear. Commissars bellow, "Stand firm, comrades!" But men break, running from that wail, some shot by NKVD for desertion. A captured July 41 NKVD report admits the dive bomber's noise induces panic disproportionate to its material effect. Soldiers abandon posts, exposing flanks. Triumph surges in Luftwaffe cockpits.
Pilots like Rudel fly 6 sorties a day, racking up kills, but it's a bitter brew. Every dive risks flak, fighters, or a stall. Stuka crews know the odds. 1 in 3 won't see 42. Fear gnaws even the victors, a shadow behind the adrenaline.
Summer 41, the Wehrmacht rolls east like a steel tide. The Stuka's the spearhead, diving on Soviet strongpoints from Minsk to Smolensk. At Minsk, June 28, STG-2 Immelmann hits the 4th Army's headquarters, bombs cratering command tents, scattering staff officers. Sergeant Yuri Volkov, a radioman, recalls, "We joked about their lapotniki, those wheel spats like peasant shoes. Then the sky screened and our radios went silent. I buried my captain under rubble." The Minsk pocket traps 300,000 Soviets, a crushing blow, but the cost is grim. Civilian refugees clog roads, machine-gunned by Stukas mistaking them for troops. Kiev, September 41. The largest encirclement yet, 600,000 Red Army troops trapped. STG-77 dives on artillery batteries, supply trains, bunkers. Lieutenant Mikhail Kuznetsov, a Soviet gunner, writes, "We mocked their slow planes, thought our 76mm guns would swat them like flies. Then they dove, and our battery was gone. The sound, it haunts my dreams. The Stuka's precision is unmatched. A single 250-kilo bomb can crack a bunker. A 50-kilo fragmentation bomb scythes infantry. Soviet T-34s, tough as they are, can't outrun the dives. The Kiev pocket collapses, but the human toll is staggering. Prisoners march to starvation camps, cities burn, families shatter. Soviet grief is a deep well, but so is defiance. Survivors vow revenge, whispering of Stukas as death's birds. The Luftwaffe feels the strain too. Stuka losses climb, flak, fighters, fatigue. A pilot, Lieutenant Karl Muller, writes home, "We rule the sky, but every dive feels like Russian roulette. The Reds are learning. Pride battles fear in German hearts. Each sortie a gamble, each siren a call to glory or doom."
October 41, the drive to Moscow. Rasputitsa, mud season, bogs, tanks, but Stukas fly, diving through sleet and fog. At Vyazma, they smash Soviet counterattacks, bombs cratering T-34 formations. Gefreiter Hans Schmidt, a German infantryman, notes, "Our Stuka boys saved us. The Reds laughed till the sirens sang, then ran like rabbits." But the Soviets adapt. Yak-1 fighters, nimbler than I-16s, start picking off Stukas. Flak batteries multiply. 85mm guns join the 37mm, guided by crude radar. STG-2 loses 30 planes in a month, crews stretched to breaking. Pilot fatigue sets in, 6 sorties a day, no rest, amphetamines to stay awake. December 41. Moscow's outskirts. The Stuka's still deadly, diving on Soviet reserves, but the tide shifts. The Red Air Force's IL-2 Sturmovix, armored ground attack planes, counterstrike, shrugging off MG-17 fire. Soviet flak thickens, 76mm guns barking. Oberlieutenant Franz Bauer crash lands near Kalinin, captured. He tells interrogators, "We thought the Reds would fold. Their laughter fueled us, but their winter, their guns, they don't break." Emotions clash, German elation fades to dread, Soviet fear hardens to resolve. The Stuka's terror remains, but it's no longer untouchable.
The summer of 1942 brought Operation Blue, Hitler's grand offensive aimed at seizing the oil fields of the Caucasus and capturing Stalingrad, the city that bore Stalin's name. To pave the way for the Wehrmacht's advance, the Luftwaffe unleashed its fury on the city. On 23 August 1942, more than 1,000 aircraft of Luftwaffe 4, commanded by General Oberst Wolfram von Richthofen, descended upon Stalingrad in waves. Stukas, Ju-87s, Heinkel HE-111s and Junkers Ju-88s blanketed the city with explosives and incendiaries. Within hours, entire districts were engulfed in flame. Soviet estimates claim that over 40,000 civilians were killed in a single day, making it one of the deadliest air raids of the war. Survivors recalled that the sky itself seemed to burn. A Red Army nurse described the bombardment as a storm of iron and fire, where even the stones screamed. The Ju-87 Stukas, infamous for their wailing sirens, the Jericho Trumpet, dived upon ferry crossings over the Volga, supply depots, and workers' housing. Their psychological effect was devastating. Men and women flung themselves flat against the earth, ears ringing, their morale shattered before the bombs even struck. German ace Hans-Ulrich Rudel, flying the Stuka, would later boast of sinking Soviet ferries and barges laden with troops, claiming to have destroyed hundreds of vehicles, tanks, and artillery. His accounts, though inflated, reflected.
For the men and women trapped in the ruins, the Stuka became more than a weapon. It was a force of psychological annihilation. Soviet war correspondent Vasily Grossman described how civilians collapsed in hysterics at the sound of the siren, children covering their heads and soldiers clawing at the ground as if trying to dig their way to safety. The sirens were worse than death, remembered a nurse named Anna Petrova. You couldn't think, only run. I saw strong men cry out for their mothers. This was the core of the Stuka's terror. It made the mind surrender before the body. Yet the very extremity of the assault hardened others. Chuikov adapted, ordering his troops to fight hugging the enemy, engaging Germans at such close quarters that Luftwaffe fighters could no longer distinguish friend from foe without risking their own men. The once terrifying Stukas became less effective in these block-by-block battles, as Soviet anti-aircraft defenses, including the powerful 85mm and 37mm flat guns, began to reap a harvest of downed dive bombers. By October, losses mounted. Between September and November 1942, Soviet Yaks, La-5s, and American-supplied P-39 Airacobras joined the fight, tipping the air balance. The Luftwaffe was stretched thin. Its Bf-109 fighters were too few to escort the Stukas effectively, and maintenance crews were exhausted. German records show that in just 3 months, nearly 200 Stukas were lost over Stalingrad, many to Soviet flak. Each loss eroded the myth of invincibility. Still, the battle remained desperate. The Luftwaffe continued to bomb factories and ferry routes, but Soviet soldiers fought on, their pride growing with each enemy aircraft shot down. As one Guards officer, Captain Dmitry Volkov, wrote, "At first we cowered. We laughed once. Now we hunt them." The shift from fear to defiance was a turning point in the psychological war of Stalingrad. When Operation Uranus, the Soviet counteroffensive, encircled the German Sixth Army in November 1942, the Luftwaffe faced an impossible task: to supply nearly 300,000 men trapped inside the cauldron. Goering promised Hitler that his Air Force could deliver at least 300 tons of supplies daily. In reality, the Luftwaffe managed barely 100 tons on average, and often far less. The Stukas, once terror bombers, were now pressed into service for resupply flights, landing on makeshift airstrips or dropping canisters to starving troops. Conditions were catastrophic. The German soldiers in the pocket froze in temperatures plunging below -30 degrees Celsius, ate horseflesh and frozen bread, and fought with dwindling ammunition. The Soviets, meanwhile, had adapted completely to the Stuka threat. Anti-aircraft units targeted resupply aircraft with ruthless efficiency, and Soviet fighters prowled the skies. Between November 1942 and January 1943, the Luftwaffe lost hundreds of planes, not only Stukas, but also transports like the U-52 and HE-111. Even Rudel, the famed Stuka ace, acknowledged that the air bridge was doomed, though he continued flying ground attack missions until the bitter end. On 31 January 1943,
Paulus surrendered the southern pocket of 6th Army. On 2nd February, the northern group gave up as well. The Luftwaffe, which had once darkened the skies over Stalingrad, now lay broken, its aircraft burning on frozen airfields or littering the snow. For the Soviets, each wrecked Stuka was more than a tactical victory. It was the collapse of a symbol of German terror. The Battle of Stalingrad marked not only the turning point of the Eastern Front, but also the death of the Stuka's psychological supremacy. What had begun as a weapon of fear had ended in mockery. Soviet soldiers, hardened by loss and grief, now cheered whenever a UJ-87 fell from the sky. The Luftwaffe never fully recovered from the staggering losses sustained in the battle. Its inability to protect the 6th Army or maintain air superiority shattered the Wehrmacht's aura of invincibility. The Soviets, by contrast, emerged with newfound confidence. Propaganda posters glorified the downing of Stukas, and songs celebrated the resilience of Stalingrad's defenders. Yet the cost was unbearable. Nearly 2 million casualties on both sides, soldiers and civilians alike. Entire neighborhoods had ceased to exist. Families were obliterated, and the Volga ran black with oil and red with blood. Writers like Grossman captured the paradox of victory. Immense pride, yet grief so vast it could not be measured. For the Stuka, the battle revealed its limitations. The siren that once symbolized terror had become a relic, useful only in an environment of total air dominance that Germany could no longer guarantee. In the war's later years, Stukas were relegated to secondary fronts or night operations, increasingly vulnerable in a sky now ruled by Allied fighters. Stalingrad had cracked the myth, transforming the UJ-87 from terror weapon into target practice. As one Soviet veteran recalled years later, when the siren screamed, we no longer feared, we smiled, because we knew the end of the fascists had begun.
July 43, Kursk, the largest tank battle ever. Stukas, now U-87D models with Jumo 211 engines, dive on T-34s and KV-1s, some fitted with 37mm cannon pods for anti-tank work. Rudel claims dozens, but Soviet defenses, flak, fighters, radar take a toll. The Luftwaffe is losing air superiority. Yak-3s and La-5s outmaneuver Stukas. IL-2s outgun them. STG-77 loses half its strength. A Soviet pilot, Ivan Kudjadub, later a three-time hero of the Soviet Union, recalls, "Their dive bombers were fearsome in 41. By 43, they were prey." The Stuka adapts, U-87G variants, with twin 37mm cannons hunt tanks, like Rudel's Kanonenvogel. But it's too late. Soviet numbers overwhelm. 8,000 planes, 20,000 guns. The sirens, once dread's herald, are silenced. Crews remove them for stealth. Emotions shift. German despair grows. Soviet confidence surges, tempered by the memory of early terrors.
In the summer of 1942, the Luftwaffe turned Stalingrad into a blazing inferno. On 23 August, more than 1,000 German aircraft bombed the city, killing over 40,000 civilians in a single day. The U-87 Stuka, with its wailing siren, became the symbol of terror. Its dive bombing so psychological that soldiers often panicked before the bomb struck. Nurse Anna Petrova recalled, "The sirens were worse than death. You couldn't think, only run." German ace Hans-Ulrich Rudel claimed hundreds of destroyed targets, sinking ferries and stranding Soviet reinforcements on the Volga. But the city refused to die. General Vasily Chuikov ordered close-quarters fighting to deny the Luftwaffe clear targets. Soviet anti-aircraft gunners grew deadly, and fighters like Yak-1s and La-5s challenged German dominance. Between September and November, nearly 200 Stukas were shot down. Soldiers who once cowered at the siren began to mock it.
Captain Dmitry Volkov wrote, "At first we cowered, we laughed once, now we hunt them." When the Soviets encircled 6th Army in November, Stukas were reduced to desperate resupply flights. The Luftwaffe failed, Paulus surrendered, and the Stuka's myth collapsed. Once a weapon of fear, it became a symbol of defeat, the scream of a broken empire fading into history.
The Stuka was never just an aircraft. It was a psychological weapon. Its infamous Jericho Trumpets sirens were engineered to terrify, not to kill. Soviet letters, many declassified in the 1990s, revealed the profound mental toll. Soldiers wrote of desertions, of officers shooting their own men to enforce discipline, of families shattered by bombs that seemed to fall endlessly. One haunting letter comes from Private Sergei Morozov in 1941, executed for desertion. "The siren made me forget my name. I ran and they shot me for it. Forgive me, Mama." For men like him, the Stuka's scream destroyed not just courage, but identity. The price was not borne by Soviets alone. German Stuka crews paid heavily. Loss rates averaged 30% annually, with many units ground down by Soviet flak and fighters. Even Hans-Ulrich Rudel, the Stuka's most famous ace, suffered terribly. His leg was amputated after being hit, yet he returned to fly again. A symbol of Nazi fanaticism or unshakable duty, depending on perspective. Decades later, in interviews during the 1980s, Soviet veterans admitted they still flinched when recordings of the siren were played. "Not the bombs," one survivor said, "the sound, like death singing."
Post-war, the Stuka faded. Jets like the MiG-15 ruled, but its shadow lingers. In museums, in survivors' nightmares, in cities like Stalingrad, rebuilt but scarred. Soviet archives credit it with 80% of 1941's air losses, but note its decline as tactics evolved. The siren's psychological edge inspired later weapons, drones, psyops. The lesson? Underestimation is a fool's tax, paid in blood. The Stuka's wail taught it, and the Eastern Front carved it in stone. Here's the truth, comrades. The Soviets laughed at the Stuka till its sirens sang their doom. It was terror, precision, a war's grim heartbeat. Honor the fallen. Visit the museums, read the diaries, keep their stories alive. Rest easy, soldiers. Your fight echoes in the silence.